Hi, Cynthia. It's so good to see you.
Hi, Whitney. So good to see you as well.
I'm really looking forward to this. Thanks for taking the time. I'd like if you'd start by introducing yourself, who you are, and where you come from.
Yes, you bet. My name is Cynthia Liles. I grew up in the church and professed when I was 9 years old the first time at
Mm.
convention with some of my girlfriends. And so then I left right when I graduated from high school. I've been asking questions of my parents for years and didn't get satisfactory answers. And I just had a really difficult time conforming to
Yeah.
the rules. A lot of things that make sense to me. But then reprofessed a couple times in I left like the day after I graduated from high school, and then reprofessed a couple times in my very early 20s and was out completely by my mid 20s. So have been out for a very long time. Have family who are still in, of course, and some family who are out. My brother and sister never professed. And
Mm.
so then have kept a lot of close relationships with professing family and friends of mine
Mm.
who are in the church over the years. Still have very, very good friends who are still in meetings
Mhm.
today. Oh, then I should say I've worked in law ever since I graduated from high school and eventually became a private investigator. Back in 2010, a two by two case came across my desk. Oh, and I'm a private investigator that works on sex abuse cases against institutions of trust. A lot of churches involved in that. Catholic church cases, Mormon church cases, United Methodist, you name it. I've worked on them. Cults
Mhm.
too. So in 2010, a letter came across my desk, which we now know was Sherry's, and knew even back then that it was attached to Sherry Autry. And so I talked to some attorneys in the United States that were wondering about this two by two case and told them there was nowhere to go with it because it was not a registered organization and the money was hidden, basically. You're not going to
Mhm.
be able to get to the money. So that happened in 2010. And then again in 2022, in October, an attorney reached out who I've worked for a very long time because an attorney was asking questions about the two by two church. And she said, "Hey, you need to talk to him because this is what you grew up in." And so I did. I reached out and explained that there was to go with this case. And he said, I refuse to accept that answer. I think we need to try. And
Mm.
at that time, and I hope you visit with Sherry as well
Mhm.
about this, but at that time, there was an open window statute of limitations in the state of California for historical cases. There have been these in various states in the United States where they open up a window or 2 or 3 year window where you can sue an institution or your perpetrator for historical abuse. Then the window closes and you're out of luck. So the window was open in California and was closing at the end of 2022. And so we got hard to work. I started contacting attorneys that I had connections with, that I've worked for, and I talked to about 30 different lawyers and firms, and nobody would take it
Mm.
because it was just cost prohibitive. There were even two giant firms that are nationally known who both looked at it twice because they could really self-fund the litigation. And even
Mhm.
those two firms said, we can't do it because we don't know if we'll ever be able to get to the money. And really, it's
Mhm.
one of the only tools available to hold institutions accountable is to sue them for money. So
Mhm.
nobody would take it. So the statute ran at the end of 2022 for Sherry's case. So then we decided, well, I should say Sherry and Lauren, those were the survivors that were talking to the attorney, obviously. Decided to pursue criminal cases. And so we were working on those when the infamous Dean Brewer letter came out. So, and they happened to
Mhm.
be in Oregon, and we were a half an hour away from the author of that letter. And we met with him, I think the day of or the day after the letter came out on the
Mhm.
internet. So.
Would you mind talking a little bit about that meeting? I don't know how much you can share about that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to share whatever. We met with him for about 3.5 hours. I don't remember everything from the meeting, but I do remember kind of starting out with, look, because it was so frustrating that these survivors could not move forward with cases, right?
Hmm.
And so I talked to him about, like, look, this is a very organized church. Why don't you just do things legally and register with the government and get church insurance or self-fund and do things properly and get legal and quit hiding your
Hmm.
money.
Hmm.
So we talked about all of that. We talked about the rampant abuse that we were discovering during our investigations, working on Sherry and Lauren's cases. And, he was aware that there was a lot of abuse. We talked specifically about Dean Brewer some and those allegations, but really, what the church needed to do things right. I mean, there is a proper way to do things,
Hmm.
uh, in my opinion. And
Hmm.
so we talked a lot about that, you know, talked about like Doyle was saying things, and I think we've heard this a lot from overseers, like, oh, he didn't really want to be in this position and he hadn't asked for it and he really didn't want this. And so, my feeling, and I told him was man up or step down. I mean, you either
Hmm.
be a leader or don't. And I was really hopeful at that time that there would be changes, that they would at
Hmm.
least try and handle things properly. And we know how
Hmm.
that went in
Hmm.
retrospect.
So you left that meeting and you're feeling quite hopeful. Where do you go from there?
Yeah. Oh, let me think back. Well, the phone went crazy. We opened a hotline that night, which we kind of thought would be survivors of Dean Brewer, and it just went wild. Which, I mean, people just started sharing their stories, not only with us, but other parties that were online or friends, family, right? Just all these stories started coming out about abuse and how the abuse situations have been handled. So I just started documenting everything, all of
Yeah.
that. I mean, I'll be honest, my hope is that someday the church can be sued.
Mm.
We know now that they have a lot of money. I mean, I had a pretty good inkling of that even back before Brewergate, but more so now, we know there's a lot of money. And I just think the right thing to do is to take care of the survivors. So that's my hope, is that someday
Hmm.
there's restorative justice.
Hmm. So you start documenting all the stories that come flooding in. How does that translate into trying to make action on those stories? Is that where you start trying to formalize an organization to deal with that?
Oh, we did that actually right away.
Okay.
Yeah, we got set up quickly so we could do things right. So we did that right away. But I had started keeping a spreadsheet actually like in December or January, December of 2022 or January of 2023, because we were hearing so many stories of abuse just when we were working on those two survivors' cases. And we've all experienced this now, probably, right? Where
Mhm.
you're talking to somebody and they like, well, I have this family member that was abused by a worker or an elder or whatever, and just all these different stories started coming out. So
Mhm.
I naively and sincerely thought that the workers did not understand what a problem they had. That was really disheartening after the hotline was opened to learn that they did know. They actually did know.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
people went to the workers about this stuff instead of going to law enforcement. And then we have a lot of stories of spiritual abuse and discouraging survivors to go to law enforcement. So, for me personally, a couple of things that were really disheartening when the hotline opened and these stories really started coming out is that I thought they would do the right thing, right? I just thought these were
Mhm.
honest, good people. Had my whole life, even though I'd been out for a really long time, I was always really protective of the church. I look back at some of the things I was saying early on during the crisis, and it's kind of embarrassing because I was very protective of it. And so to see that they really had no intention of doing the right thing, that was so disheartening. And then also that they were willing to lie.
Mhm.
So many lies, just outright lies. And so that was shocking to me. Then the other really shocking part was to learn about all of the sexual activity going on with the in the work.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was
Mhm.
just wild to be learning about all those things, right? And
Totally.
then to have to look at it and go, oh, this is something very different than I thought it was. And so I no longer feel protective of it. I see it as one of the most damaging systems in existence as far as a religious group.
Hmm.
So,
So I know you spent a lot of time, a lot of hours and
mhm.
sleepless nights working on
Yep,
AFTT and all these cases. I
yep.
wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit about the work you were doing, like the day-to-day work that you were facilitating.
Yeah, really survivor interviews is which is what I do a ton of on my other cases, sex abuse cases. So I do a ton of interviews and I really wasn't, I was just taking doing survivor interviews. I wasn't really doing a lot of other investigation at that point as far as contacting additional witnesses, trying to gather documents and that type of thing. But eventually I did start doing some of that where we're really starting to hammer these out as I would on any other case. And then some of the ones that were still under the statute of limitations for criminal prosecution, helping survivors walk the path of getting those reported to law enforcement, which has been happening all over the world. I mean, we were doing this in jurisdictions all over the place, right? And
Mm,
so that, and then working with detectives and constables is what they call them up in
mm,
Canada, working with those people, getting them documents, other names, witnesses, whatever we can do to help in that regard.
mm,
So, still working on a lot of that actually. Hmm.
right. And then that also translated into you communicating a lot with the ministry and different workers. Would you mind sharing it about the communication you had to have, what you were trying to get across to them, what work you were trying to do, especially in those early months where you thought there might be change? Was there a lot more communication with the workers?
Them letters, that, just ever really were felt like the action, various allegations, smart thing to do is remove them. It's the proper thing to do. It's going to save you a lot of trouble down the road, as far as liability and these things, right? So I was really clear on what needed to happen. And so I started off by telling them, hey, this person has serious allegations and they need to be removed from meetings. We're done with that, right? I'm not telling them how to manage their institution. They're just not seeing the seriousness
Mhm.
in this. Or they
Mhm.
do, and they've set up this perfect system to avoid liability.
Mhm. Right. So you've put out a lot of stats over the years about number of perpetrators, percentage of perpetrators in the mystery and in
Hmm.
in the membership. Would you mind, I don't know if you have that at hand, would you mind sharing some of those statistics with us?
Yeah, let's see here. I can tell you how many perps have been reported to date. And I actually have a little stack here in my office that has not been added to this yet. So,
Mhm.
I mean, this changes constantly, right? There have been over 200 names published so far.
Mhm.
So we still have a lot to go through. 1,151 perpetrators have been reported so far. And every time we run the data, we could run it today, we always come out somewhere between 35 and 40% of those are workers. Yeah, I'm looking just of the last one, two, three, four, five. The last five I'm looking at right here that came in. One was a member, one was an overseer, one was an elder, and two were workers. Yeah.
And you're dealing with a lot of perpetrators that have passed away, and I imagine that
Yes.
a lot of members are still reporting.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Actually, I just took a report this week from a woman whose perpetrator is deceased, and she was expressing how happy she was that we are taking reports and releasing names of deceased perpetrators because she thinks it's really important to show the historical nature of this and how far back it goes. Yeah, I told her some people are really upset that we publish deceased perpetrator names. So,
Mhm. Yeah. Would you mind talking a little bit about just the statistics of reporting in general? Like, I know the majority of people that have been abused will never report.
mhm.
Could you talk about the credibility of the perpetrators that you do publish? Would you be willing to talk a little bit about some of the skepticism around believing survivors?
Yeah, let's see. I don't even hardly know where to start. So the names we've released so far, we do a really careful job of vetting those claims. And
Mhm.
people may be surprised. There is usually corroborating evidence, even for a survivor who's never told anybody before. Sometimes there's things that just corroborate the story and it all lines up. And so we work hard on figuring all of that out before we release names. A book was just recommended to me this weekend. I'm going to tell you about it. I have not read this book, but I'm anxious to read it. It's called Credible. Look it up. Yeah, I think it's about this question of why do people not want to believe survivors?
Mhm.
So,
Mhm. I don't even really know where to go from here because I appreciate so much of the work that you've spent over the last 3 years specifically, but clearly a lot longer than that. What, from your personal professional experience, would you wish that we understood about systemic abuse like this?
well, unless an institution is willing to address the problem and put safeguards in place, you just leave it ripe for abuse. So I think anybody from the outside looking in on this is going to, well, I can tell you because I've had so many professionals react to it, right? When you tell people that the ministry stays in the homes where there are children, they're shocked. There's steps you can take to eliminate risk. One
Mhm.
of those would
Mhm.
be get batches.
Mhm.
The friends will still support you in that. Or you
Mhm.
could get part-time jobs and still minister. There's all sorts of things that could happen,
Right,
right? But yeah, as an institution, you have to be willing to address the issues. And
right.
I think it's pretty clear now that there is no intention of doing that.
Mhm. Right.
Zero.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say to people that feel like the crisis is over, everything's kind of getting back to normal? From your perspective, seeing cases continue to come in, what would you like us to stay aware of and alert about as these years keep rolling forward?
I mean, I have Boy Scout cases, by the way, that I've worked on for 11 years.
Hmm.
So 2.5 years is not a very long time.
Hmm.
Sometimes these cases are a long haul to where you're finally at the point where there may be some accountability. I just hope that someday there is, whether that's criminal convictions or civil cases that provide some type of restorative justice for these survivors.
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
ideally, what I would really love is for the ministry to open the coffers. I know they have a ton of money and start paying out lump sum settlements to the survivors. That's what I would really
Right,
love. Start taking care of the survivors and
right.
get real about things. Well, yeah, the average age for a survivor to come forward is between 48 and 52 years old. We are
Hmm.
not going to know about the abuse that is happening right now for a very, very long time. And because the ministry is refusing to put safeguards in place, it's going to be as bad as it has been.
Hmm.
That's my feeling, and that's my
Hmm.
belief.
Hmm. How can we support survivors in feeling believed and safe in sharing?
Well, I think that all the different platforms that are available to the X2 by 2 community are really important and very valuable. And actually, as much as I hate doing media and even these types of interviews, although the reason you're
Mm.
doing this for posterity, right, I think is
Mhm.
great. But Media is also really important. We have survivors that have come forward who have been out of the system for a very long time, out of the church. I can hardly call it that anymore, but they've been out for a very long time and they learned about this through media,
Mm,
um, or a
mhm.
friend who saw a television story or something like that, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's really important that these places exist for people who learn down the road. And even like now, if there's some young person that's being abused, they might not start digging around till they're in their 30s, 40s, right? For a lot of survivors, they don't become really interested in having something done until they see that they're well, sometimes a lot of times when they have their own children, so when they get to the age where they're having their own children and their child is at the same age as they were when
Mhm.
they were abused. So we're talking years and years down the road, right? And
Mhm.
so I think it's
Mhm.
really important that these spaces stay available. I know it might be
Mhm.
hard to wrap your head around that CCF might exist in 50 years, but I think it's important that the
Mm,
spaces are there,
okay. Yeah.
um, because I think all of these spaces have been extremely valuable to survivors. I think that's the
Yeah.
best thing we can offer as a community of two by twos and X two by twos is to just be there, right?
Mhm. Absolutely.
Start educating yourself on perpetrators. Read the book Predators by Dr. Anna Salter, right? You guys have done educational stuff in this forum. Also, educate yourself about the lifelong effect of child sex abuse on survivors and why institutions should be held accountable. I mean, I'm
Mm,
telling you, a ton of these two by two cases are worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. There are cases
mm,
just all by themselves, one perpetrator and one survivor, right? Because the church has known for so long that they were covering for abusers, and society does not like that. So the
right.
punishment would be severe if we were talking
Mhm.
jury verdicts against the institution. One of my concerns is it's becoming even more insular. Some workers are telling the members of the two by two church that all of these allegations are made up. I hear this every week.
Mhm.
People talk to me who have just been told this by a worker, right? All these allegations are made up. It's all a lie. And so they're creating this even more insular system of us against them. And this was for me, this was never about the church. This was about addressing abuse within the church.
Mm, mhm.
I don't want anybody telling me how I should worship. And so I don't want to tell you how you should worship either. But I really hate to see it in an abusive system. So can we please address the abuse? Well, let's start with the
Mhm.
sex abuse. And then, there's been a lot of other kinds of abuse too, but at least let's start with
Mm.
the child sex abuse and the sex assault.
Is there anything else that you feel like you'd really like to put in here for those of us to know, to document for history of this whole crisis and how it's gone?
One thing that's so interesting to me is that there have been people trying to address this problem for decades, and Wings was started to address this. I'm not sure the exact year Wings was started, not very long after the internet came into existence for all of us to be able to share, right? The World Wide Web.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Wings has been out there forever trying to beat this drum that there is a problem with child sex abuse and sex assault within this
Mm,
organization. So, props to all of these people who have
mhm.
been doing this work for so long. I just feel like because of my position, because I work on these cases, I will work on them for as long as I can and pass it down to somebody else who will take over from me. And, there's other groups out there doing the same work. There's people that report to friends of theirs that are never going to report to us. I mean, if we can just all be available for this reporting. But yeah, there's groups out there that have been trying to beat this drum for a very long time. And I just want to
Mm,
honor their work and to work with them
mhm.
to continue the
Mhm.
work. If we
Mhm.
can save one kid from being abused,
Mhm. It's
so
worth it.
it's
Yeah.
worth it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So if there's anybody watching that might be a survivor that's never reported, could you walk us through how to report that to you or to others or to the FBI?
Yeah, the FBI still has a hotline. Well, they have a hotline open and they have a form that you
Mhm,
can access through their tips
mhm,
page. It's like it's
mhm,
tips.fbi.gov. Be
mhm,
sure to mention the 2 by 2 church if you do that so that it gets to the correct person who's
mhm,
heading up the investigation. You can report to me. The hotline number is the same. You can contact me by my cell phone number, my website, however's easiest. And Wings is still a place you can report to. And some people just report to their friend to start the process of maybe I want to report this to law enforcement and what should I do, right? The beauty of having kind of a master database is, and because these workers traveled around so much, you may have survivors in different areas who were
mhm,
abused by the same person. And there is
mhm,
power in numbers with sex abuse cases. And
mhm,
so the more people that come forward, it can help a case. I guess another thing I want to say that's been really frustrating to me, we've got some criminal investigations going on, and I know that there are people out there who have information that would be so helpful to these survivors' cases, and they just kind of stand back, and it's like
mhm,
this idea that we don't really want to be involved. And I get it.
mhm,
It's because of this psychological
mhm,
protection of the church and that you can't do this to the people you know and love, right? It's
mhm,
conflicted. It's this
mhm,
like, oh, I just don't want to be involved because I'd be going
mhm,
against the church.
mhm,
No, we want
mhm,
this perpetrator to be held accountable. These are criminal cases. Now, that's really sad because actually, the truth of the matter is, those people could be shunned and looked down on for being in the church and participating in a case on behalf of an ex 2 by 2 survivor going against a perpetrator. Sad, sad
mhm,
state of affairs, right?
mhm,
We should
mhm,
all be coming together to support these survivors in their cases. And
mhm,
so if you know a worker that has allegations was in a certain place at a certain time and you saw him there and you saw him with this kid, come forward. Call law enforcement. Reach out to the FBI. Reach out to me. I'll know who to get you to, right? Yeah, I just did that on a case this week. This witness does not have to come and talk to me. I can give them the number of the detective. If they will please just report to the detective what they remember and what they saw, that they were there
mhm,
and they know,
mhm.
they noticed that this person has
Right.
certain interests, right? It can be
Mhm,
the smallest thing that can make the
mhm,
biggest difference. That's good, hard corroborating evidence, right? If this worker was in this field at this time and this list exists, that shows us that's evidence that can be
mhm,
entered into evidence.
mhm. So if somebody sees, let's say, a perpetrator name show up on an X2 by 2 site or on CCF or Facebook or something, and they say, "Oh, that person was in my field at such and such a time," is that even that small amount of information something that you would encourage them to reach out about?
Yes, especially if we do not have a workers list. And so like on my real cases, my real
Mhm,
cases, actually I was just looking at one this morning. So it's a church case and I get the church directories. And it shows everybody that was in the church that year and everybody that was in the youth group that year. And I reach out to every person I can find. So on these cases, if I was working these up like I do my regular ones, I would be getting those lists and I would be contacting every person in that field I could find. Because here's the honest and sad truth. If one kid was abused by a worker in that field, there are probably others.
that's right.
If people think they don't know anybody who's been abused, they're wrong.
Yeah,
Everybody knows somebody.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, I want to thank you for not just the time, not just the grueling labor that you've put into this and the care and the heart. But I also want to thank you for this, for taking time to share it, to put it on the record of what you've been a part of. And on behalf of not just myself, but for all of us, thank you. Thank you for the work that you've put into this.
Well, thank you too, Whitney, for all of your work. I think all
Mm.
of the stories that you gather are so important, and everybody who was raised in this system has a story, whether they realize it or not. Everybody has a story. And I think it's so great that you're recording all of these stories. Some of your stories, actually, some of your interviews that were really a tipping point for me. There was one in particular that you did where I was like, that's it. I can no longer pretend that this is not an abusive system through and through. And
Mhm.
that's where I am today. And I got to be honest about it, right? It's abusive through and through. I understand why people stay. It's sad how
Mhm.
much abuse there has been.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you
much for
so
your
much
time.
for everything. Yes.